The sun rose slowly over the Sierra Nevada mountains. April 12, 1981, began like any other spring day. In the small resort town of Keddie, California, dew clung to the pine needles. A sense of peace usually filled the mountain air. But this peace was about to be shattered into a million jagged pieces. Sheila Sharp, a young teenager, returned home to Cabin 28. She had spent the night at a friend's house. She expected to find her family sleeping. Instead, she walked into a scene of unimaginable horror, a scene that would forever be seared into her memory. The door creaked open. A strange metallic scent hung heavy in the air. It was the smell of blood. Sheila's heart began to pound in her chest. Something was terribly wrong. She called out for her mother, Sue. No answer came. She called for her brother, Johnny. Silence. She called for his friend, Dana. Only the chilling stillness replied. The cabin, usually filled with the sounds of a lively family, was eerily quiet. This quiet was not peaceful. It was the quiet of death. It was the quiet that precedes a scream. Moving deeper into the small cabin, Sheila's eyes struggled to adjust. The dim morning light filtered through the windows. It revealed a tableau of utter devastation. Furniture was overturned. Belongings were scattered. And then she saw them. The bodies. Her mother, Sue Sharp. Her brother, Johnny. And Johnny's friend, Dana Wingate. They lay lifeless, bound with electrical wire and medical tape. The brutality was shocking. The violence was incomprehensible. It was a scene no child should ever witness. A scene that defied all reason. Panic seized Sheila. She stumbled back, her mind reeling. This could not be real. This had to be a terrible nightmare. But the cold dread seeping into her bones was all too real. She fled the cabin, screaming for help. Her cries pierced the morning calm. They alerted neighbors to the atrocity within Cabin 28. The nightmare had just begun. For Sheila, for the community of Keddie, and for the investigators who would soon arrive. The Keddie Cabin Murders had claimed their first victims, and the mystery was already taking root in the blood-stained floorboards. Cabin 28 sat nestled among other rustic cabins. It was part of the Keddie Resort, a once popular vacation spot. But by 1981, the resort had seen better days. It had become a place for more permanent low-income residents. The cabins were somewhat isolated from each other. Dense pine forests surrounded the area. This isolation offered privacy. But on that fateful night, it offered something else. It offered cover for unspeakable acts. The remote nature of the location meant screams might go unheard. Help might be too far away. The initial shock rippled through the small community. Keddie was a place where people knew their neighbors. Violent crime was rare. A triple homicide was unthinkable. As Plumas County Sheriff's deputies arrived, they were met with a scene of chaos. The small cabin was a vortex of violence. The sheer ferocity of the attack was immediately apparent. Investigators, hardened by years on the force, were visibly shaken. The air was thick with a palpable sense of evil. It clung to the walls. It whispered from the dark corners of the small, unassuming structure. The cabin itself was modest. A living room, a kitchen, bedrooms, too small a space for such immense hatred. The perpetrators had used knives and a claw hammer. The victims had been bound tightly. The struggle must have been horrific. The scene spoke of a rage that was personal, uncontrolled. It was not a clean crime. It was messy, brutal, and terrifyingly intimate. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of events, but the chaos within the cabin offered few easy answers. It only presented more horrifying questions. Who could commit such an act? The isolation of Cabin 28 became a central point of the investigation. Did the killers know the area? Did they know the Sharps? The remote setting would have allowed them to operate with less fear of immediate discovery. They had time. Time to commit their heinous acts. Time to ensure their victims could not fight back. The quiet of the mountains, usually a comfort, now seemed menacing. It had hidden the sounds of a family being destroyed. The tranquil facade of Keddie had been ripped away, revealing a dark underbelly of violence. Glenna Sue Sharp was a loving mother. She was 36 years old. She had moved to Keddie with her children. She was trying to build a new life. Her son, John Sharp, was only 15. He was a typical teenager. He loved his friends and his family. Dana Wingate was John's friend. He was 17. He had tragically also been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was staying over that night. These were innocent lives. They were not involved in any known criminal activity. They were simply a family and a friend trying to live. The brutality inflicted upon Sue, Johnny, and Dana was extreme. They had been bludgeoned and stabbed repeatedly. The coroner's report would later detail the horrific extent of their injuries. The savagery suggested a deep-seated rage, perhaps even a frenzy. One of the murder weapons, a steak knife, was found at the scene. It had been bent from the force of the attack. This detail spoke volumes about the violence. It painted a grim picture of the victim's final moments, moments filled with terror and unimaginable pain. They had little chance against such ferocity. Two younger Sharp children, Rick and Greg, were asleep in an adjacent bedroom. Miraculously, they were unharmed. Justin Smart, a young friend staying with them, was also spared. They slept through the entire ordeal. Or perhaps they were too terrified to make a sound. This detail added another layer of horror to the crime. How could such violence erupt just feet away from sleeping children? Did the killers know they were there? Did they intentionally leave them unharmed? These questions haunted investigators and the surviving family members. The thought of what could have happened was terrifying. The community mourned for Sue, Johnny, and Dana. They were remembered as good people, people who did not deserve such a fate. The senselessness of the crime was a heavy burden. Why them? Why this family? There were no easy answers, only a profound sense of loss and injustice. The brutality was a stark contrast to the peaceful mountain setting. It was a violation of everything Keddie stood for. The innocence lost that night was not just that of the victims. It was the innocence of an entire community. A community that would never feel quite as safe again. Amidst the carnage, another horror emerged. Sue Sharp's 12-year-old daughter Tina was missing. She had been in the cabin that night. Her shoes were found. Her coat was there. But Tina herself was gone. This discovery added a desperate urgency to the already grim situation. Was Tina abducted by the killers? Was she a witness they needed to silence? Or had she met an even worse fate somewhere else? The questions multiplied, each one more agonizing than the last. The search for Tina Sharp began immediately. Law enforcement and volunteers scoured the dense forests. They searched the rugged terrain surrounding Keddie. They hoped to find Tina alive. Every hour that passed dimmed that hope. The area was vast and unforgiving. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. There was no sign of Tina, no ransom demand, no clues to her whereabouts. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The disappearance of a child struck a particularly raw nerve. It amplified the community's fear and outrage. A young girl snatched from her home. The search efforts were extensive. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the landscape from above. Posters with Tina's smiling face were distributed far and wide. Her image became a symbol of the Keddie tragedy, a symbol of innocence lost and justice denied. The family clung to the hope that she might still be found, that she might somehow have escaped the fate of her mother and brother. But as time wore on, that hope began to dwindle. The silence surrounding Tina's disappearance was deafening. It was a constant, gnawing reminder of the unresolved horror. For the surviving Sharp children, the loss was compounded. They had lost their mother and brother. Now, their sister was missing. The emotional toll was immense. The uncertainty surrounding Tina's fate was a special kind of torture. Was she out there, suffering, or was she already gone? This not knowing was a heavy burden to bear. The search for Tina became a desperate plea, a plea for answers, a plea for closure, a plea that, for a long time, went unanswered. The forest kept its secrets. The perpetrators remained shadows. Section 5, Years of Silence, a somber discovery. 3 long years passed. 3 years of agonizing uncertainty for the Sharp family. 3 years of frustration for investigators. The Keddie murders case grew cold. Leads dried up. Witnesses, if any, remained silent. The mystery of Tina Sharp's disappearance deepened with each passing day. The hope of finding her alive had all but faded. The question now was whether her remains would ever be found. Would the family ever know for certain what happened to their beloved Tina? The silence was a constant torment, a painful void. Then, in April 1984, a discovery was made. It was nearly 3 years to the day of the murders. A man collecting bottles made a grim find. He stumbled upon a partial human skull. It was located in a remote area, near Camp 18 in Feather Falls, Butte County. This was roughly 50 miles from Keddie. The location was rugged. It was not easily accessible. The discovery sent a chill through everyone involved in the Keddie case. Could this be Tina? The possibility brought a renewed sense of dread, but also a flicker of potential closure. Forensic examination confirmed the worst fears. The skull belonged to Tina Sharp. An anonymous phone call to the sheriff's office shortly after the discovery but before official identification stated the cranium was Tina's. This call added another disturbing layer to the mystery. How did the caller know? Were they involved, or did they have information from someone who was? The discovery of Tina's remains answered one question. She was no longer missing. She was dead. But it raised many more. How did she get there? Who put her there? Finding Tina's remains brought a new wave of grief, but it also brought a strange sense of relief for some. The torment of not knowing was finally over, at least in part. Her death was officially ruled undetermined, but the implication was clear. She was another victim of the Keddie killers. The location where her skull was found suggested a deliberate attempt to hide her body, far from the original crime scene. It spoke of a calculated effort to conceal this part of their horrific crime. The forest had finally given up one of its secrets, but the killers remained elusive. In spirit, if not in active daily pursuit. Section 7. The Keddie Enigma, a puzzle without end. The Keddie Cabin Murders remain one of America's most disturbing, unsolved crimes. Decades have passed since that horrific April night, yet the questions still echo through the silent woods of Plumas County. Who were the perpetrators? What was their motive for such unspeakable violence? Why were the younger children in the adjacent room left unharmed? These questions form the core of the Keddie enigma. a puzzle that investigators, amateur sleuths, and the surviving family have tried to piece together for years. But crucial pieces are still missing. The lack of a clear motive is particularly baffling. Robbery did not seem to be the primary goal. Though some items were missing, the slaughter seemed far too extreme for a simple theft. The personal nature of the bindings and the overkill suggested a deep-seated rage. Was it a crime of passion, a vendetta against Sue Sharp or someone in her family? Or were they random victims of a deranged individual or group? Each theory has its proponents, but none have been definitively proven. The ambiguity fuels endless speculation and frustration. Over the years, new information has occasionally surfaced. Potential witnesses have come forward with belated accounts. Old evidence has been re-examined using modern forensic techniques. In 2016, a hammer matching the suspected type of murder weapon was found in a local pond. This discovery briefly reignited hope for a breakthrough. However, even with these developments, the case remains stubbornly unsolved. The passage of time has made it even more challenging. Memories fade, witnesses die, evidence degrades. The puzzle becomes harder to solve with each passing year. The Keddie case has become a fixture in true crime lore. It is a chilling reminder that sometimes evil can strike without warning, and justice can remain elusive. The enduring mystery is a source of fascination for many, but for those directly affected, it is a source of ongoing pain. The unanswered questions are not just a puzzle. They are a constant ache, a reminder of the lives lost and the justice denied. The Keddie enigma is more than just a cold case. It is a gaping wound that has never fully healed. Section 8. A community scarred, the lingering shadow. The Keddie murders sent shockwaves far beyond the resort itself. The small, tight-knit communities of Plumas County were deeply affected. Such brutality was unheard of in this quiet corner of California. Fear gripped the residents. People locked their doors. They looked at strangers with suspicion. The sense of safety and trust that once defined their community was shattered. The murders were a brutal intrusion of an outside evil, or perhaps more terrifyingly, an evil that lurked from within. This uncertainty was corrosive. Children who grew up in the area at the time remember the fear. Parents warned them about talking to strangers. The woods, once a place of adventure, became a place of potential danger. The name Keddie became synonymous with horror. It was whispered in hushed tones. The story was passed down, a local legend born of a terrible reality. The cabins at the Keddie Resort, especially Cabin 28, stood as grim monuments to the tragedy. They were constant reminders of the violence that had occurred there. A shadow fell over the once idyllic mountain setting. The impact on law enforcement was also significant. The Plumas County Sheriff's Department faced intense scrutiny. Their handling of the case was criticized. This put a strain on their relationship with the community. The inability to solve such a high-profile crime was a heavy burden. It haunted the careers of many officers involved. The case highlighted the challenges faced by small, rural departments when confronted with major crimes. The Keddie murders became a lesson, a hard lesson in the complexities of homicide investigation. For the surviving members of the Sharp family, the emotional scars are immeasurable. They lost their mother, brother, and sister in the most horrific way imaginable. The trauma of that discovery, the years of uncertainty, the lack of justice. These are wounds that time cannot easily heal. The community too carries its own scars. The Keddie murders changed the fabric of life in that region. It left a lingering sense of unease, a reminder that darkness can touch even the most peaceful places. The shadow of Cabin 28 still stretches long. Section 9. Echoes in the Wilderness, the Unanswered Cry. Today, Cabin 28 is gone. It was demolished in 2004, an attempt to erase a painful landmark. But the memory of what happened there cannot be so easily razed. The Keddie Cabin murders endure. They endure in the minds of those who remember. They endure in the files of cold case detectives. They endure in the countless articles and documentaries that explore the chilling events of April 1981. The story remains a haunting testament to the fragility of life and the persistence of evil. The unanswered questions are perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Keddie legacy. Who wielded the weapons with such savage force? Why did they choose the Sharps and Dana Wingate? What happened in those terrifying final hours inside Cabin 28? And what became of Tina Sharp in the days or weeks before her remains were discarded miles away? These questions cry out for answers, but the wilderness holds its secrets tight. The perpetrators, if still alive, carry their guilt in silence. A silence that has lasted for decades. The emotional toll on the survivors is a profound and lasting tragedy. For Sheila Sharp, who made the gruesome discovery, for Rick and Greg Sharp, who were spared but lost so much. Their lives were irrevocably altered. They live with the ghosts of their slain family members. They live with the knowledge that the killers were never brought to justice. This lack of closure is a heavy cross to bear. It is a wound that festers, reopened with every new theory, every anniversary of the crime. Their pain is an enduring echo of the violence. The Keddie murders serve as a grim reminder. Some mysteries remain unsolved, some crimes go unpunished. The search for truth can be a long and arduous journey, a journey that sometimes ends without a clear destination. But the memory of Sue, Johnny, Dana, and Tina endures. Their lives, though brutally cut short, are not forgotten. The echoes of Keddie are a call for remembrance, a call for vigilance, and perhaps someday a call that will finally be answered with truth and justice. Until then, the unanswered cry lingers in the mountain air.